Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our CDA for this month for June, Training for Trust, Advancing Open Research Integrity in Middle East and North Africa. I will be just waiting for people to come in. Normally, we do have some latecomers that come 2 or 3 minutes late every time, so you might be hearing things over and over again. But in the meantime, please do feel free to share your information on the chat box to let us know about you, where you're from, and we would love to see interactions between people today. So our session today, titled "Training for Trust: Advancing Open Research in Integrity in MENA" in partnership with Crossref and the Embassy of Good Science. It will be held today. And first, let me please introduce myself. My name is Jasser Helmi. For those of you who have never met me before, I'm responsible for the translation for forum, and I handle the memberships and any onboarding processes for any new members to forum. And I will be really happy to be with you today. Um, just before we start our session, we will be just having a little bit of some housekeeping rules that may help us facilitate the flow of our session today. So first of all, let me introduce you some Zoom features. I'm sure that most of you know about it, but for those who don't, we have the movable windows, which is a Zoom feature. This will allow you to move your window if you're working on something, like sending emails, following up on something. So this will give you a chance to set this window aside or put it in the corner so that you can follow up with your regular daily tasks. And the second feature is the raise the hand. Normally, we use this feature if you noticing that one of our speakers is speaking a little bit fast or something. So please do use this feature in order to let us know so that we can pass your message to our speakers today. And the third feature, which is the chat box, I see that most of you have been interacting with us. Welcome everybody again. So please do use this chat box in case you would like to let us know where you're from, which organization you're working for, sorry, and if you are facing any sort of technical issues. And if you happen to have any questions, please use the Q&A box so that it will help us in many ways. First of all, your question will not be lost. If you're putting it in a chat box, it might be lost. But if you have a question, please do feel free to drop it on in the Q&A section so that we can get back to it when it's time to ask questions to our speakers. And make sure it's a content question, and we will do our best to set some time for it in order to respond to all questions, hopefully. Next slide, please, Mira. So before we start, I would like to introduce you, for those who don't really know about it, the Forum for Open Research in MENA, which is known for Forum. It's a non-profit membership organization supporting the advancement of open science policies and practices in research communities and institutions across the Arab region. And we have four key pillars in our forum, which are support, create, encourage, and champion. Support the advancement of open science ecosystems in higher educational institutions and research libraries across the Arab world, and to create accessible and localized resources relating to the implementation of open science policies and practices, and encourage collaborative community partnerships and cooperation between members and partners of Forum, and champion the development of right to left functionality in key open source and open science technological solutions. Next slide, please, Mira. And we have our vision, which is to unlock research for and in the Arab region and working towards a more open world. And our mission is to support the advancement of open science practices in research communities and research institutions across the Arab region. And this will happen by facilitating the exchange of actionable insights and development of practical policies. Next slide, please, Mira. And our network is growing. It involves researchers, librarians, professors, policymakers, university leaders, and open science advocates. Until today, we have around 19 members and partners from different spots from the world, and we have worked with more than 5,000 individuals across 211 institutions from 110 countries, and we are working to grow it. And we have our capacity building, which is to create localized resource library, Diamond open access journals, community development activities, which is one of the series we are attending today. Our event today is part of our community development activities and also regional research projects. And in speaking of localized resource library, we have our resource library available on our website, which includes many elements of open science, like open policies, Creative Commons, and you are it is available on our website, and you can have a look at it whenever you want. It's really helpful for people and researchers, not only in the MENA region but in everywhere in the world. And the Diamond Open Access Journal, we have our journal Al-Wusul and the regional research projects. Thank you. Next slide, please, Mira. And the community building, it's a region. We have three elements for the community building: the regional discussion forum, the regional open science newsletter, and stakeholder priorities framework. Next slide, please, Mira. So for connection and representation, we are connecting local stakeholders with global organizations and supporting collaborative multilateral dialogues. And we participate in global working groups, and we provide Arabic translation for global organizations and signing declarations and joining aligned organizations. Next slide, please, Mira. So, without further ado, I know that you're not here to listen to me, or you are here to listen to our speakers today. So let me please introduce our speakers for today. We have Eleonora, she's Public Affairs Officer, and Christopher Maguire, Senior Science Editor, and Sydney, he is Senior Research Compliance Specialist. And they will be here with us today. And I really hope it's a very meaty session today, and I really hope it gets benefit to everybody listening to us. So please let me remind you again, I'm sure that we will be receiving dozens and dozens of questions today, so that just make sure to drop it and in the Q&A box, not to lose it within the chats. I see that we are receiving so many chats today, which is promising for our today's event. So we're here, and we really hope it is a very interesting session for everybody. Next slide, please, Mira. Next slide, please, Mira.
I think that maybe I can share, yes, my screen now.
Yeah, we will be leaving it to Eleonora today.
Yes, I think so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yassir, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. And just to say upfront, participation is totally optional, but we'd really love for you to engage if you feel comfortable. And don't worry, we've got a few different ways for you to take part, so you can choose what works best for you. So I am going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. So yes, welcome again to this forum workshop, everyone. We run different versions of this research integrity session. Some can last up to 3 days, but today we are doing the shorter 3-hour format. So I'm really happy and honored to be here with all of you, and I want to thank the organizers for having us. Before we jump into the actual content, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves and break the ice a little bit. So I will go first. My name is Eleonora, or just Nora, if that's easier for you. I'm Italian and kind of I live somewhere between Italy and the rest of the world. I did a PhD in classics and archaeology in France, so I come from, just speaking, an academic background. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with open scholarship and open publishing, which brought me to my current role as a public affairs officer at Frontiers, a gold open access publisher based in Switzerland, where I work on policy and institutional engagement. So I now pass it over to Chris and Sydney to introduce themselves too.
Okay, I'm Christopher Magor. I'm originally from Australia, but I was born in Bangladesh. I live in Japan, and I am a senior science editor for a medium-sized editing agency here in Japan. So I work with researchers all over the country and sometimes from outside of the country. Yeah, over to you, Sydney.
Good morning, all. My name is Sydney. I'm a senior research compliance specialist at KAUST in Saudi Arabia, but I'm actually from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm a bioethicist. I've worked in the field of research ethics and integrity for the past 16 years, and that has been my involvement in this particular event today. So you are welcome to post any questions, get engaged. This workshop is a two-way conversation. It's not just about us that's going to lecture. The more benefit you stand to gain is by engaging actively in this session. So welcome, and I hope you find this as a good learning opportunity. Good morning.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sydney. Thanks also for this call to action and engagement. It's really needed today. And now, just a little bit about you. So since we don't have time for individual introductions, we thought it would be helpful to share a snapshot here of the amazing group gathered here today. So as of early June, we were already thrilled to see such strong interest with nearly 250 people registered for this workshop. So we were really curious to get a sense of who you are and where you are joining us from. So we created this heat map to visualize a bit the diversity in the room. So we are spanning today over 40 countries with particularly high participation from Egypt, Emirates, Oman, and Morocco, among many others. And it's truly exciting to see such a broad and international community coming together to explore research integrity. And what's also really interesting is that even though this course was designed with a focus on the MENA region and how research integrity is evolving there, we received strong and enthusiastic engagement from across all continents. So participants are joining not only from MENA, but also from Europe, North America, and other regions. So, which in itself tells an important story. The topic we are exploring today clearly resonates across geographies, roles, and research communities. So it shows just how universal the conversation around research integrity has become. And regardless of where we are all joining from, I also want to take a moment to highlight the really interesting mix of roles and expertise in the room today. While researchers make up just over half of the group, this is far from a researcher-only crowd. Yes, Sydney, you raised the hand?
Yes, just... Yeah, you are sharing the slides. Apologies for that.
Yeah. I was just saying that while researchers make up just over half of the group, this is far from a researcher-only crowd because we have a strong presence of librarians as well, over 20%, bringing deep insights into access knowledge organizations and how research is discovered and shared. There's also a solid group of infrastructure professionals, right? And research administrators, each making up around 4 to 5%. So their behind-the-scenes work is essential to keeping the research ecosystem running. So we are very thrilled to have this target represented as well today. And beyond that, we've got also students, educators, health professionals, policymakers, publishers, each offering their own lens. And we even have a data analyst and a journalist with us, which is pretty great to see. It really shows how interconnected and collaborative this space has become. So all in all, there's a broad range of perspectives here today, and that's exactly what makes this conversation so valuable. So thank you so much for your participation. And all right, before we jump into the main content, let's take a moment to break the ice a little bit. So we've already seen that there's a lot of diversity in the room, right? Both in terms of where you're joining from and the roles you play. So I think that this kind of variety naturally brings different perspectives on a topic like research integrity. So here's a little warm-up question to get us thinking, and a poll is now launched. Yeah. So if research integrity were a travel destination, where will it be? So we've put together a few playful options to choose from. So you have Switzerland. So think about this country that is neutral and meticulous. Then we have Iceland, known for its transparency and good governance, or rather Trans-Siberian Railway, a long demanding journey, or rather Yellowstone National Park, protected and shared. And finally, Antarctica, remote but highly regulated and a space for international cooperation. Or maybe something entirely different. So feel free to drop your own destination in the chat if you have other options more than the ones you are already seeing the screen. So I cannot see the results of the poll. Maybe someone can see it.
You say I can end the poll, but currently we have around 50% for Switzerland, followed by Iceland, 16%. The Trans-Siberian Railway is around 12%, and then the Antarctica 12% as well, and the national park is at 6% so far.
Okay, so
publish the results as soon as you feel like we can stop taking answers.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So please, Chris and Sydney, don't hesitate to jump in and also comment these percentages. It's really interesting, right?
Yeah, really interesting. I think sometimes my mood on it changes, and my answers would be different every day. So.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, the key word is that it's always contextual. And it all depends on the context.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the interesting part of these responses. Thank you very much. So it's clear that the diversity in the room is already showing through in the variety of ways you are thinking about research integrity. And I think these results from the poll clearly demonstrates these different approaches towards research integrity. So interesting. By the way, I would encourage you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go, because we will revisit it at the end of the workshop to see how your perspectives may have shifted over the course of our time together. And so when approaching again this question at the end of the workshop, it will be nice. It will be a nice way to reflect on the journey we have taken over these 3 hours. So now that we have broken the ice and heard your first thoughts on research integrity with this huge endorsement for the Switzerland interpretation of research integrity, it's so interesting. Let's dive into the agenda. So we will start with the basics of research integrity, then we will move into the dilemma game part with a more interactive session. And after a short break, a 10 minutes short break, it will be highly needed today. We will explore how open science and integrity connects. So looking at this through Crossref's work on the scholarly record. And then Chris and Sydney will guide us through emerging trends, especially around AI and research integrity. And finally, we will wrap up with a look at local and international initiatives and close with a short reflection. So let's start with research integrity, covering its definition, why it's so important, and the impact it has on research. So why is research integrity such an important and timely topic? I would like to start by sharing something from James Butcher's latest newsletter, the Journalology issue number 120, which came out just last week. So this issue called Integrity Guides highlights some really interesting developments in the research integrity space. It talks about research integrity sleuths, people working hard to uncover problematic papers, right? And one standout example is the Medical Evidence Project, which received nearly $1 million in funding from open philanthropy with the goal to quickly identify flawed medical studies that could distort meta-analysis and influence medical guidelines, things that can have a real impact, as you can imagine, on patient care. So why does this matter so much? Because usually investigations into research misconduct take months or even years, right? And findings only came out at the very end. So this project aims to speed things up and share problems as soon as they are found, helping to protect the reliability of science and public health. So this example really shows why research integrity is so crucial right now, making sure science stays timely, trustworthy, and reliable. So this example really helps us also set the stage for what we are focusing on in this first part of the workshop. Our goal is to get clear on what these core research values actually mean, not just in theory, but why they matter in real life. So we want to build a kind of awareness, what you might call moral sensitivity, so we can better spot and handle the tricky situations researchers and others often face. At the same time, it's good to remember that applying these values is not always black and white. There's usually some gray area when you are making decisions in the real world. So keeping that in mind will really help as we move forward. So let's start with answering the question, what is research integrity, which is not exactly straightforward, but don't worry, we can tackle it together by breaking it down into manageable parts. In particular, we need to approach this question from 3 angles so we can gradually build a clear understanding of what research integrity truly is. First of all, we can start by looking at the definitions of research and integrity separately, which will help us form a working definition of research integrity. And to do so, a key reference for us will be the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. And with this working definition in hand, we then get an overview of the core principles and norms outlined in the main codes of conduct in terms of research integrity. So this gives us a solid foundation of what's expected. And lastly, we will need to dive into the real-world applications of these ideals. In other terms, we discuss how the ideals of research integrity sometimes clash with the realities of conducting research. And this tension is something that researchers, research managers, and science professionals often experience. So let's get started. Each step will bring us closer to a deeper understanding of research integrity. Beginning with a discussion of research integrity, it may be good to first find a common notion of what is research, right? So in the first paragraph of the preamble of the European Code of Conduct, which was developed by all European countries and academies to apply for all scientific and scholarly fields, research is defined as the quest for knowledge obtained through systematic study and thinking, observation, and experimentation. While different disciplines may use different approaches, they each share the motivation to increase our understanding of ourselves and the world in which we live. So the selected quotes really emphasizes the shared motivation across all disciplines to increase our understanding of ourselves and the world in which we live. And in order to get a working definition of research integrity, it's also a good idea to have a look at what the word integrity means as well. So according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, the known integrity can mean three things. First, integrity can refer to a firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values. So in this sense, integrity correlates with the term incorruptibility. Secondly, integrity can also refer to an impaired condition and is therefore related to the term soundness. And third, integrity can refer to the quality or state of being complete or undivided, which relates to the term completeness. So considering these clarifications, how do we interpret research integrity? What working definition can we give to this broad concept? So when applied to research, specifically as research integrity, the term integrity can refer to a firm adherence to a code of scientific values, and it can also mean the unimpaired condition of research relating to the idea that research quality or state is complete or undivided. Together, these aspects point us towards an ideal quality or state of research that is closely linked to the researcher's own integrity, right? So we can talk about a researcher's integrity when we consider how well a researcher's work reflects the values and at the core of the scientific conduct and action, and to what extent they have internalized these scientific values that are incorruptibility, soundness, and completeness. However, researchers need a compass to navigate their quest for knowledge, right? Guiding them along the four cardinal directions of their journey. So on page 4 of the European Code of Conduct, 4 core principles of research integrity are laid out. First of all, reliability. This entails ensuring the quality of research, which is reflected in the design, the methodology, analysis, and the use of resources. Then you have honesty. This principle underscores the importance of developing, undertaking, reviewing, reporting, and communicating research in a manner that is transparent, fair, and comprehensive. Then you have respect, and this encompasses showing consideration for colleagues, research participants, society, ecosystem, cultural heritage, and the environment as a whole. And finally, accountability. This involves taking responsibility for the research from conception to publication, including its management and organization, training, supervision, mentoring, and its broader impact. So here you have an overview of the norms of good scientific conduct as outlined by the European Code of Conduct in specific context. We won't have time to delve into all these norms in detail today, but you can review each of them at your own pace once I have sent out these slides and supplementary materials after the workshop. So in brief, we can regard these 4 principles of research integrity as an effort to define the values essential to the scientific conduct. And it's so important because without reliability in ensuring the quality of research, the findings may be arbitrary. Honesty has a unique connection to the truth, and it's important to recognize that no one has a sort of a monopoly on it. Respect is crucial too in acknowledging that seeking or speaking the truth should not come at any cost, and we must recognize the dignity of others, whether colleagues, research participants, society, ecosystems, cultural heritage, and the environment itself. And finally, we must always be prepared to take responsibility of our actions, right? So the principle of accountability helps us acknowledge the consequences of our actions and outputs that is so crucial, especially in the pre and post-publication process. So now that research and integrity are clearer concepts for us now, we can distinguish 3 levels of research integrity. First, we have the individual researcher. So while it is the individual researcher who finally decides how to act in a given situation, placing the entire burden of responsibility solely on the individual would be inappropriate. In fact, an individual is socialized and operates within a given research culture, which unfortunately does not always imply a culture of research integrity. And of course, both the individual researcher and the research culture operate within a broader research system that represents the 3rd level of research integrity. So as you already know, this system sometimes imposes imperatives on researchers, institutions, publishers that may themselves undermine certain values of research integrity. So these aspects are highly complex and it's not feasible to address all relevant issues here. Instead, I'm going to focus on another crucial aspect, that is the scope of research integrity. And the European Code of Conduct encompasses a broad spectrum of research behaviors, detailing both what a responsible researcher should do and what they should not to do. So what a responsible researcher should do is called good research practices, which are also referred to as responsible conduct of research. And this is how research is supposed to be: relevant, valid, reproducible. On the other hand, of the continuum, we find misconduct research fraud, traditionally defined by the 3 major sins: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, commonly referred to as FFP. And between these 2 ends of the continuum lies a large gray area known as questionable research practices, QRPs, or sloppy science. So QRPs can stem from sincere mistakes and intentional carelessness, as well as from dubious errors and neglect. So in these situations, intentionality is not always clear, yet the practices are still undesirable and detrimental. And for this reason, the term detrimental research practices, DRPs, is also used. And this is extremely clear in the publishing field, right? So publishing research results is and always has been a necessary task for a researcher. We know that research output is counted by the number of publications, and for many years, it has been the primary method of evaluating both researchers and research institutions. But although there is no doubt about the necessity to publish research results, the quantitative assessment of researchers often brings about a shift in focus from the necessity to share knowledge to the imperative to publish as much as possible in journals with a high impact factor. So we can observe that this imperative can evoke several questionable research practices or worse. So I will invite you to consider some of them you may already be familiar with. First of all, there's something called salami slicing, where some researchers increase their number of publications by splitting up the work unnecessarily, often from one study. So what could have been published as one paper is published in a number of subpapers. And as a result, this technique expands a researcher's CV and makes it look as if the researcher has done much more work than they actually did. Another way to artificially expand one's CV is through gift authorship, or more euphemistically called honorary authorship. So this occurs when a researcher, often a senior one, claims authorship for a publication of work to which they haven't fully contributed. Another effect of publication pressure can be the overstating of positive results to make an article more appealing than it actually is. So this involves downgrading or not even mentioning negative results. So over time, this can lead to what is called publication bias. Also, authors might adopt the suggestions of editors, peer reviewers, without being too critical, and this is often done to increase the chances of acceptance of the paper for publication. And for the publication pressure, researchers may also become more likely to take up research projects that have a higher chance to result in publication. So research may then be following hypes and move away from risky yet necessary research that does not promise guaranteed positive results. So these are just some of the most common and important examples, right? But the research landscape is always evolving with AI and technological advances becoming more deeply woven into research. There's a real risk that questionable research practices and misconduct could grow in the coming years. In fact, the landscape is already more complex than this, and if you're curious to learn more about how the current research assessment fuels QRPs and their possible causes, I highly recommend Stuart Rich's 2020 book, Science Fiction's Exposing Fraud, Bias, Negligence, and Hype in Science. So we cannot be certain how often research misconduct and questionable research practices, QRPs, occur, because those who engage in such behaviors are unlikely to admit it and often try to hide their deceit. So essentially, we don't know what we don't see. However, various studies have asked researchers to report anonymously on the misbehaviors they've engaged in, and Daniele Fanelli conducted a meta-analysis of 21 surveys, and the findings are pretty telling, because within the 3 years prior to these surveys, up to 2% of respondents admitted to fabricating or falsifying data, and up to 34% admitted to engaging in QRPs. But this could be just the tip of the iceberg, because when asked whether they had observed others engaging in research misconduct, the numbers were even more alarming. So up to 40% had observed fabrication or falsification by others, and up to 72% had seen others engage in QRPs. So this disparity suggests 2 possibilities. Either most respondents are more ethically sound than their peers, or breaches of research integrity are far more common than people are willing to admit. So Fanelli's meta-analysis included over 20,000 respondents from the United States alone, which gives weight to these observations. So understanding these breaches is so crucial, especially for those of us with a background in academia or professional research. So by recognizing these violations as they happen, we can really uphold the integrity of our fields and foster a culture of honesty and reliability in research. So let's imagine a scenario where a researcher is grappling with an internal conflict. So on one hand, they think, do I have a conflict of interest? Obviously not. While on the other hand, they deeply understand their interest in conflict. So this brings us to an important point laid out in the European Code of Conduct of Research Integrity, particularly in the section related to reviewing, evaluating, and editing. So the code states that reviewers and editors with a conflict of interest should withdraw from any decisions concerning publication, funding, appointment, promotion, or reward. And as professionals in science editing, scholarly publishing, research management, it's crucial to recognize and address potential conflict of interest, right? So with that in mind, let's think about some possible violations of this rule that you may have seen or heard about. Take a moment to reflect on any experiences where conflict of interest or other ethical breaches were not properly addressed, and consider how those situations played out. So in the upcoming dilemma game section with Chris, you will get to brainstorm and discuss these kinds of challenges together. So over to you, Sydney, for this interactive part.
Okay. Oops. my camera is on. Yeah, so the dilemma game. Can you go to the next slide, Eleonora?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an application that's available from Erasmus University Rotterdam. It's free to use, and yeah, available on iOS, Android, and there's even a browser version you can use. But today we're not going to be using it because of some technical issues with handling this number of participants. It tends to go fairly slowly and can lag a little when you have a lot of people. So we have simulated it for you using PowerPoint. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the basic principle of the dilemma game is you're presented with an ethical dilemma, and then you get multiple choice options of how you think you should respond, followed by a summary answer from an ethics expert. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first one, unsolicited advice. So I'll read this for you. I'm a researcher in the field of criminology, and I submitted my research project to the Research Ethics Review Committee, RERC, of my university. The committee stated that they will approve the project on the condition that I increase the number of participants, as this will increase the validity of the results. This change is, in my view, outside the purview of the committee and more related to the technical setup of the research. Even more, finding additional participants will be very difficult to realize. The head of my department tells me to simply agree and make the necessary change. We need approval as quickly as possible as we want to continue our research. What shall I do? Okay, next slide, please, Eleonora. Okay, so these are our options. A, I agree with the proposed increase of the number of participants. Although it has nothing to do with research ethics, it may enhance the quality of my project. B, I approach someone from the committee that I know well and explain my case, hoping for a reassessment. C, I approach the dean of my faculty and ask her to overrule the decision of the committee. D, I tell the committee that I agree with the proposed change, but in reality, I will not try very hard to add more participants. If the committee asks later on, I will explain that we couldn't find more participants. Okay, can we have the poll, please, Mira? Okay, so please select one answer from the poll, and let's take a couple minutes to think about our responses. And we will discuss our answers after we see the poll results. Okay, Mira, can we see the results? Okay, so a lot of A's and a B, quite a few B's, not as many C's or D's. Okay, Eleonora, can we see the next slide, please? Okay, these are the results from the Dilemma Game app. So it's just the collected data of everyone who has tried this dilemma. So you can see a lot of people chose A. I agree with the proposed increase of the number of participants, although it has nothing to do with research ethics. It may enhance the quality of my project. And also there were quite a few C's and D's, but sorry, B's and D's, but not so many C's. Okay, let's see the expert review, please, Eleonora, the next slide. Okay, so the expert review. Although the task of the RERC is to focus on the ethical aspects of the proposed research, ethical and methodological aspects are often closely related. Moreover, if a proposed project is methodologically flawed, this would be problematic from an ethics viewpoint as well, because it means that research subjects are asked to participate in a research endeavor whose validity is limited at best. Sloppy research will fail to enhance our knowledge and may erode trust in science. While the quality of our work is evidently more important than speed, striving to avoid biases and errors is part of ethically sound research. And the same goes for openness to criticism and solicited and unsolicited feedback. If a change in the design, in this case, an increase in the number of participants, enhances the quality of the work, option A, this is also relevant from an ethics perspective. Option B is evidently unethical, as it would undermine the independence of the judgment of the RERC, the Ethics Committee. Option C would amount to misconduct and an abuse of power, while in option D, the researcher would fail to live up to the principle of honesty and integrity. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Can share it in the chat or raise your hand and speak.
So yes, there's already one question by Hala
Okay.
Osman. Shouldn't this be approved by a research committee first? Sydney, hand over to you. You raised your hand.
Yes, good morning, colleagues. I think this is an important topic. We're all familiar with this notion of bad science. The lack of ethics lead to bad science. And so this is a case study that really shows us where the ethics and the integrity of the researcher overlaps, and the lack of the researcher's integrity might lead to dire consequences. So it's important that science and ethics meet each other. In this case, really showcase how the overlap between science and ethics cannot be ignored, and the research ethics committee has certain authority in terms of making judgment on methodological aspects of the research. You cannot really divorce the science when you do an ethics review. And as Hala said, some institutions have a research committee where the research is first being approved. Some call it a scientific committee. But that all depends on your institutional policy framework and your institutional makeup in terms of what process need to follow. Do you first go through an ethics scientific review before you actually approve the protocol? Because obviously the issue that we have here in terms of the number of participants is a methodological issue. And like Hala said, or question, should this not first go through a research committee? That's important because some institutions, as I've indicated, they have a process whereby the research, before it goes to the ethics committee, is first reviewed by a faculty level or departmental or institutional research committee before it goes to the research ethics committee, so that by the time it's submitted to the ethics committee, the science, the question, the methodological issues have been sorted out. Thank you.
Yeah, I also like that the expert reviewer raised the issue of the participants. I mean, it's a matter of respect for the people who are in the study, whether they write it or not. Yeah. Anyone else have anything they would like to add, or shall we move on to the next one, which is a little bit more topical?
Yeah, there is another comment by Tatiana. So I think, just 1 second, it scrolls too quickly. No.
I can read it. I think it
Yeah.
is too strong of a statement to call B unethical. As an
Mhm.
expert doing research, you should be able to defend your opinion about the method you have chosen and hear the argument of the RERC. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, I think one needs to be mindful of academic freedom as well, and find a balance between good research and academic freedom, because sometimes academic freedom might infringe on somebody's like human rights or a human participant's right in terms of the research. So finding that balance is important, the balance between academic freedom on the one hand and institutional research ethics committees.
You can take another minute if anyone wants to ask anything else or suggest anything else. So one thing with the dilemma game, I mean, it often gives us these A, B, C, D answers, but that doesn't always, they don't always fit in the cultural context within which we work, or yeah, there may just be a different way of looking at it. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's move on to the next dilemma. OpenAI in science. I'm a university researcher and I grapple with an integrity-related dilemma in my research concerning the use of OpenAI. My research project involves developing an AI system for generating realistic human-like text. My dilemma arises from the potential misuse of this technology for generating deceptive or fake content, threatening the credibility of information in the digital age. What should I do to mitigate the potential risk? Okay, let's see our options, please, Eleonora. Okay, A, I stimulate ethical use by advocating for clear guidelines on responsible AI content generation and promoting digital literacy to help individuals discern between real and AI-generated text. B, I promote the use of mandatory labeling of AI-generated content, ensuring that consumers are aware when they encounter content produced by AI. C, I engage in collaboration with ethics experts to assess the potential consequences of my research and explore ways to address the ethical implications before proceeding. D, I abandon the project because the ethical concerns, particularly the risk of misinformation and deception, outweigh the potential benefits, placing societal integrity above technological advancement. Okay, can we see the next poll, please? Okay. Let's take a couple of minutes to think about our answers. This is much more of a mixed bag, a lot to consider.
So I can see that many in the chat opted for A.
Okay, well, shall we see the poll results? Okay, wow. So a fairly even split between A, B, and C, not so many for D. Okay. Would we like to see the review? These are, by the way, what the app users chose. So a lot picked C. And same as us, very few picked D. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please, Eleonora. Okay, this time we have two expert reviews, and you'll understand why in a moment. The dilemma epitomizes the ethical quandaries researchers face in the era of AI. It prompts us to reflect on the broader implications of AI in shaping our information landscape. The 4 options presented underscore the complex interplay between technological progress and ethical responsibility. This dilemma reminds us that while AI has the potential to enhance various aspects of our lives, its ethical use is paramount. It forces us to confront the ethical imperative of ensuring that AI technologies are harnessed for the greater good and not allowed to undermine the integrity of information and communication. In a world where information is increasingly digital and ubiquitous, the responsible development and use of AI become essential safeguards to preserve trust and authenticity. Researchers must navigate this terrain with unwavering commitment to ethical principles, recognizing that the responsible advancement of AI is as vital as the innovation itself. Okay, we don't need to reflect on that too long because we have another review. Can we go to the next slide, please? This dilemma and expert review 1 was, except for some small textual changes, entirely written by ChatGPT. It shows how difficult it is to distinguish text written by real authors from AI-generated texts, and how embarrassing it may be to compete with ChatGPT. At the same time, our experiment confirms what other colleagues have been pointing out. ChatGPT is able to generate a credible piece of text, but it is not able to think. This is notably recognizable, I would argue, in the expert review. The reflections offered here contain fairly general truisms, but the author fails to come to the point, and a decision for a particular course of action is not made. Sure, ChatGPT prompts us to reflect on and navigate the interplay between progress and responsibility, but answering the question how to do this is concretely in research, how to do this concretely in research situations requires some capacity for thinking. Chatbots are the sophists of today. They easily generate swathes of text, but cannot convincingly address ethical dilemmas without guidance by thinking humans. Although we do not know what the future will bring. Okay. Yeah, and let's have a look at some of these responses. I chose option A because it emphasizes proactive responsibility in the use of AI in science. By advocating for clear guidelines and promoting digital literacy, this approach ensures that individuals can distinguish between human and, yeah, this was the response. So what does anyone have any opinions on this? Or would anyone like to discuss how AI is finding its way into writing and the ethical dilemmas we face with that? Can we go back to the options, please, Eleanor? Someone just asked. Oh, back. And back maybe 2 more slides, I think. Yeah. These are the options. Sydney, what are your thoughts on these?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, to say that, you know, AI has really infiltrated academia and scientific writing. It's really at a point where, and we can see from the many papers that have been published using AI, and in particular the undisclosed use of AI, where AI tools like ChatGPT and other generative AI tools have really enabled the scientific world to produce publications and papers that become so difficult to really distinguish between human written text and machine or AI written text. So it is an ongoing dilemma, and we will see later on how publishers and journals have come up with policies that speak to the basic principles of research integrity, accountability, transparency. Because while it's such a difficult task to really distinguish 100% the accuracy of the AI written text or human written text, the burden and the focus, the burden of proof is on the researcher to declare the use of AI in that particular scholarly output. So it all speaks to the research integrity principles that Eleonora alluded to, those 4 principles in the European conduct. And I will later on look at the Singapore statement and how those 4 principles are also promoting the disclosure of AI, the use of AI in scholarly outputs.
Yeah, and I would say, just looking at the text, there are a few clues there in that it is AI generated. One of them is the use of the word paramount, which AI is quite fond of, among a few others.
Dive into.
Yes, delve, and we see quite a few of them, and we see quite a few of them together throughout a paper, which tends to raise suspicion. But we'll look more at that later. I think, of these options, I think A speaks most to my opinions. People, there should be clear guidelines, and at the moment there are not really clear guidelines in a lot of places. Yeah. Do we want to have a break now, Eleonora, or do we have time for one more?
No, I will just propose to handle with this section, launching also the last poll, and then we can have like a coffee break.
That sounds good. Okay, so can we see the next poll, please, Mira? Skip through that one in the next.
Maybe we should also read the last dilemma scenario.
Oh, we should read it?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so more than 1,000 papers. A prominent research manager from one of the top 25 universities on the Shanghai ranking gives a lecture on the importance of research integrity at an international conference. The conference program contains a short bio indicating that the speaker has co-authored more than 1,000 academic papers and has supervised more than 100 PhD researchers. Being in the audience, I wonder whether it is possible to be a co-author on more than 1,000 papers in the sense of the Vancouver guidelines, where authorship requires making a substantial contribution, and whether it is desirable or possible to supervise more than 1,000 PhDs. Also, I wonder whether we academics should present ourselves in such a competitive manner. What do I do? Okay, and let's see our options. A, as soon as the lecture is finished, I go to the microphone and, after thanking the speaker for his nice lecture, I ask him whether research integrity is compatible with the style of working suggested by such metrics. B, instead of sharing my concerns during the plenary session, I wait for the breakout session where there is more time to discuss such issues in depth. C, instead of asking my question, I decide to write a paper exploring the possibility of imposing a maximum on the number of papers academics can reasonably claim to have co-authored, and on the number of PhD supervisions they claim to be involved in. D, during the preparations for the next international conference, I suggest the organizers to change the way academic speakers present themselves putting more emphasis on societal relevance and collaboration in their bios. I think this one is heavily culturally influenced. I know what most people would pick here in Japan, and they probably wouldn't go and grab the mic. That would be seen as extremely disrespectful, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, what would have been nice additional information with this case study is also to see if the person has accumulated these accolades like 1,000 papers over 20 years versus 10 years versus 5 years, because that again will contextualize whether or not, it's plausible, feasible for anybody to publish 1,000 papers. It also depends on the institutional context, where you have large PhD teams or postdocs that really publishes. But I suppose the issue around this particular case study is the definition of substantial contribution, because that is globally the requirement for authorship is there must be intellectual, meaningful, scholarly contribution, significant contribution. And whether it's plausible to do that, 1,000 papers, 100 PhD students at the same time. But let's see what our audience, our participants, what their responses are.
And also, if anyone would like to offer a why, would be interesting to see.
They are in the chat between D, B, and C, where most of our participants choose D in the chat.
Okay, let's see the results, please. Wow, that's very interesting. So a lot chose B, and quite a few chose A. So would anyone like to offer an explanation for their choice? Because I think our answers to this would differ quite greatly depending on where we're from. Mariam, would you like to speak or write? It's entirely up to you. In my case, living in Japan for as long as I have, I think the culture here is very non-confrontational. And so doing something like A or B in that sort of environment in Japan would be, it could be quite humiliating for the person that you're speaking to. Whereas D would be probably be the more common choice, because it's sort of handled behind the scenes and not focusing on it this time, dealing with it for the next time would be the choice. Yeah, I think A was a little strong for me.
This is also what Hala is saying. Okay, A is related to rudeness too. And what else? I think that there's also Mariam saying I choose C because making a paper will affect more people. It will reach more audience. Okay.
Yeah. Sydney, what would you think? What would you choose? And Eleanor?
Yeah, I think it would take a bold person to go for option A, to take the mic and start to questioning the person and his bio. The other context that we also don't have in terms of how senior this person is, and it could be a keynote speaker, and for keynote speakers who typically they have these elaborate bio, and you kind of boosting this person's accolades and achievements over the years. But for me, as most of our colleagues indicated, it's about creating awareness of this particular issue. And I think that this is such a common issue within academia, within the publishing world, where as Eleonora alluded to salami slicing. Why do people participate in salami slicing? It's more about the quantity, because the system globally is about the H index, how much publications you publish. That is, instead of focusing on something like what is the societal impact or the contribution to science when you publish. But by and large, at most, if not all conferences, when we have these speakers, the first thing you ask is, give me your bio. And obviously it's a personal, subjective way of presenting yourself to the academic world, so that they can see you as a person of authority when you speak on a particular subject. But in my case, as some of our colleagues indicated, I would have gone for the option of sending an email to the conference organizers, to talk about how we actually sell our speakers. Do we have to focus on numbers? What is the relevance of these numbers? How many papers I've published and PhD students I've supervised? Does that add to the person's authority as a speaker? But yeah, like I said, that is quite subjective. It's also, as you mentioned, it's cultural, and one needs to be mindful of those aspects. I certainly would not have been as bold to take this to a plenary and start having conversations around a person's bio and what is acceptable in terms of 1,000 papers versus 100 papers per annum. And there are many case studies on Retraction Watch and other public platforms that talks about this topic of the quantity over quality of publications.
It's also interesting to read all comments in the chat. So Moses, what a wonderful name, wrote, I choose A because it's worth appreciating the experiences of the presenter. Then asking the question, there is a point of gaining more clarity and to show that the presentation was actually, so it's a pretty different position compared to the previous one, saying that he is maybe too much rude for the context. Fatma said, me too, I choose A and B, and Ala commented, to make a change and save time, D is appropriate. Oh, I'm scrolling too much. D is appropriate to reach the right audience who are working in international conferences. Then Camila, again, I choose B because I would like to know how long took this speaker gain so many papers, so which topics those papers were related to. And then Mariam, D will only address a limited number of people though. So there many comments in the chat.
Mariam, oh, sorry, go on. Mariam also said in another comment, in Egypt, A or B will cause a quarrel. And I think that's a really good thing to note, that depending on where you are, people are going to respond differently.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The right choice may depend on where you are and who you're speaking with. And
it's a highly cultural and country sensitive topic. So it's really interesting to see this diversity, also reflecting the heat map that we showed at the very beginning of this workshop. Okay, there are so many countries represented today with so many perspectives and sensibilities towards research integrity. So it's really good to see these different perceptions materialized through the dilemma game up.
Let's have a look at how the stats broke down for the app users. Oops, one back. We went, yeah. So interesting, a lot of people chose B. I guess a lot of Europeans.
Can we go one slide back, please?
Sure.
Yeah. Because here we can see what the responses were on the dilemma game actually, and how that might resonate with what the audience, our participants have indicated. So if we can just go next slide, please, Eleonora.
Yeah. So a lot chose the plenary session. Sorry, the breakout session. Yeah. Less bold, but still bold, I think. Yeah. Okay, and let's go to the expert review, and then we can take a break. Evidently, this conference is an interdisciplinary event, a meeting of disciplines of different research and publication cultures. In biomedical fields, for instance, publication cultures and authorship conventions may significantly differ from normal practice in, say, the humanities. Large-scale teamwork may give rise to long lists of authors and to research units involving numerous PhD researchers co-supervised by multiple supervisors led by the head of the laboratory. In short, metrics need to be contextualized. This being said, the issue at stake in this dilemma is an important one. Many cases of misconduct resulting in retractions involve early-stage researchers who are insufficiently guided by their formal supervisors. In such cases, we often notice that, whereas formal supervisors are eager to harvest the benefits, publications, citations, theses, etc., they are not always sufficiently involved in the daily challenges or in addressing concrete integrity issues. In addition, this dilemma is about how researchers present themselves. Here we notice the need of a shift of emphasis from competitive metrics to collaboration and impact, so that traditional metrics are combined with other indicators, providing a more comprehensive view. Also, in the context of recognition and reward, bios are not an innocent genre. The way we present ourselves at conferences indicates how we see good science. Publications and citations are important, but not as an end in themselves, rather as a means to a goal, producing good and relevant research. In short, all four multiple choice options may contribute to creating a research culture that emphasizes impact and collaboration rather than egocentric competition. So yeah, everyone's right. Yeah. Okay, so we'll leave you here with a poll question. Under what circumstances is AI usage acceptable? So A, all researchers should be allowed unlimited use. B, researchers should be allowed to use AI with an appropriate declaration. C, use of AI should be limited to small parts of a report. D, AI should not be used at all. And we have an E, other, enter in chat. So let's take, shall we say 10 minutes, Eleonora?
Yeah, absolutely. 10 minutes break, coffee break, so you can respond to this poll in the meantime, and we will use the results of this poll just to kick off the section related to AI and research integrity.
Okay. So see you all in 10 minutes.
So hello again, everyone. Let's get back to our workshop after the 10 minutes break. So let's get back to our workshop by putting research integrity into a practical context, specifically how Crossref supports research integrity, right? So we will explore Crossref's infrastructure and its role in maintaining the integrity of the scholarly record, or ISR. So I think an important piece we haven't touched on yet is open science, an area that's rapidly growing in the MENA region and where form is really making a huge difference. So open science and research integrity are deeply connected, right? You can't truly do open science without research integrity. through research integrity can exist in other models that are not fully open. Still, open science provides the transparency and openness that make research integrity truly accountable. So in policy, the link between research integrity and open science is not always clear, which might explain some gaps in advancing open science with a strong focus on integrity. That's why it's so important to start bridging these two pillars, so open science and research integrity, and Crossref is playing a major role in making that happen. So now let's take a moment to look at why Crossref is such a key player when it comes to both research integrity and open science. And it really sits at the intersection, as you can see from this slide, of trust, transparency, and collaboration. So first of all, Crossref has a global impact. It connects researchers around the world, speeds up discovery, and helps make knowledge more accessible. And a great example of that was during the COVID-19 pandemic. Crossref released a massive dataset with over 10 million records, 100 million records in June 2020 to support vaccine research. And that's the kind of real-world life-saving support infrastructure like Crossref can offer. But it's not just about volume, it's also about discoverability, because Crossref provides open metadata for millions of articles, which makes collaboration easier and research more visible. Another important point, it's the second pillar, is that Crossref is committed to open infrastructure. It follows the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, or POSI, which means it's guided by values like transparency, sustainability, and being driven by the community it serves. And these 16 commitments help keep it accountable to the principles of open science and open access. What really matters in the context of research integrity is that Crossref also helps enable trust. How? By treating metadata as trust signals. That means every DOI, every funding reference, every retraction notice, these are all pieces of information that help us assess the credibility of research. And lastly, Crossref promotes a holistic view of the scholarly record. Research is not just about the final publication, it's about all the inputs and relationships. So who funded the work, what data supports it, whether it's been corrected or retracted, and what conversations it has sparked. So Crossref really helps preserve and connect all of that. So in short, Crossref helps really make research more open, more transparent, and more trustworthy. And that's exactly what we need to ensure that both research integrity and the future of open science. But coming back to the holistic view of the scholarly record, this is exactly where Crossref becomes a key enabler of what we now call the research nexus. So by connecting not just articles, but also people, institutions, datasets, grants, peer review corrections, retractions, Crossref helps us move beyond a static view of research. So it allows us to see the entire ecosystem as a network of relationships, actions, and contributions. So in other words, it enables a full understanding of the research nexus, this idea of a rich, open, and reusable web of knowledge that reflects how science really works. And that's not just valuable for researchers, it's crucial also for funders, policymakers, institutions, and the public too. Because only when we have this connected picture can we truly assess the integrity, impact, and evolution of research. But at this point in time, you might also be wondering, okay, but how does Crossref actually make all of this happen in practice? Well, here's a quick overview of some of the tools and services that Crossref offers to help build a reliable, open, and trustworthy research integrity ecosystem. So first of all, you have Crossmark. This is a key tool that flags updates, corrections, and retractions in real time, helping ensure that the version of record is always transparent and traceable. Then Similarity Check, a plagiarism detection tool that allows publishers to assess the originality of submitted content, important for catching issues before publication. Then participation reports, right? These show how much metadata publishers are contributing, highlighting their commitment to transparency and stewardship. Very important, the funder registry. It tracks funding acknowledgements, helping to connect research outputs to their sources of financial support. And then event data. This tracks and links activity around research objects like mentions in blogs, Wikipedia policy documents, or even citations in other outputs, giving a fuller picture of how research lives and evolves over time. So through all these services, Crossref really helps us move from talking about research integrity to operationalizing it, making it visible, verifiable, and interconnected. So how do we actually trust a piece of research? That's where metadata as trust signals comes in. Metadata is the information around a research output, and when it's complete and open, it helps us judge the credibility of the work, right? So for example, we have ORCI that shows us exactly who the authors are, ROR IDs that tell us where they are affiliated, and funding metadata that shows who supported the research actually. Then retractions or corrections that let us know if anything changed after publication. And then links to datasets, software, references help map how this research fits into a larger picture. So metadata is not just technical, it tells the story behind the research. And when that story is clear, it becomes much easier to trust. Now, why are we sharing all this with you today? Because everything we've talked about, trust, metadata, open infrastructure, is deeply connected to Crossref. All three of us, Chris, Sin, myself, are proud to serve as Crossref ambassadors for Europe and Asia. This means we are part of a global network of librarians, researchers, publishers, societies, and tech innovators who care deeply about strengthening scholarly communication. So we are not just representatives, we are local points of contact. We run workshops, offer training, listen to your needs, and that bridge the gap between global infrastructure and local practice. So if you are curious to learn more about being Crossref ambassadors, I really encourage you to check out our blog at crossref.org/blog. You can also reach out to us anytime and join the discussion of the Crossref Community Forum at community.crossref.org. So let's keep the conversation going, and soon I will also share with you in the slide link to the form to be completed in order to ask joining the ambassadorship community. So everything we've just discussed about Crossref and its tools is also incredibly relevant to the challenges we are facing today with the rapid rise of AI in research. So now I'll hand it over to Cindy and Chris, who will dive into how we can safeguard research integrity in an AI-driven world.
Thank you, Eleonora, and good morning all. Good morning from a misty, cold Cape Town in South Africa. And as Eleonora said, how do we safeguard research integrity in this time of AI? While most people say AI will infiltrate and impact scholarly writing and research, it's abundantly clear that it has already infiltrated that space. And so, Eleonora, can you share the slides, please? So in our endeavor to responsible conduct of research, it's important that we firstly distinguish between what is research ethics and what is research integrity. Now, research ethics, as we have seen earlier with a case study that Chris shared with us, has to do with all those ethical considerations in research. So, for example, you could follow the Belmont principles in terms of respect for persons, autonomy, in other words, beneficence and justice. Those are the ethical considerations that your ethics committee typically would consider when reviewing a paper from an ethical perspective. On the other hand, we have then research integrity, and Eleonora already alluded to the various definitions of integrity, the combined research integrity definition, but essentially Research integrity has to do with the researcher behavior viewed from the perspective of various policies, norms, codes, and standards. So essentially, research integrity has to do with your behavior as a researcher in terms of how you conduct your research and how you publish your research. And next slide, please. Okay, so as I've indicated, research integrity then has to do with the ethical considerations, whereas research integrity has to do with the trustworthiness, the accountability, and all those aspects. So responsible conduct of research essentially is about the ideal behavior, the perfect behavior, living in a utopia for where research is conducted. And then on the far end, we have the worst behavior, that would be falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. And then in between, you would find that there is those what we call the questionable research practices, or as Eleonora alluded to, the detrimental research practices. Next slide, please. So the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity that goes back to 2010, it's nothing new as 4 basic principles. And this also overlaps with the European Code that talks about honesty in all aspects of the research. As you can see, the honesty in the planning, the methods, data collection, how you attribute credit in the publication, reporting, and interpretation of the research. Accountability, and accountability is not just the researcher, but accountability, we all play a specific role when we in research integrity. It's an ecosystem. So it's the researchers, the institutions, the funding agencies, the publishers, the journals, and so on, that is accountable for the research that's being presented in these journals. Professional courtesy and fairness in working with others, that essentially is about the respect that we have for our collaborators, for our colleagues, for other researchers, but more importantly for the human participants, the animals, and the environment. And then finally, good stewardship of research on behalf of others. And there we can loosely translate that to the rigor of the science and transparency. And it also speaks to the notion of you cannot really divorce science and ethics. It goes hand in hand. Next slide, please. So we have seen over the last decade in particular, and you might be familiar with the International Research Integrity Survey that was conducted in 2022, 2023. And in that particular survey, they highlighted how questionable research practices have been added to this equation of misbehavior. So while research integrity in particular focuses on the prevention, the identification of handling what we call the 3 sins of science: plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication, questionable research practices have also been added to the equation. Why? Because it impacts the validity and the trust of the research findings. And while we now have seen over the last, since ChatGPT in particular in November 2022, how AI has become part and parcel of the academic space, the scholarly writing space, we ask the question, so what about the undisclosed use of AI in scholarly writing? Does that constitute research misconduct? In other words, are there elements of plagiarism, falsification, or fabrication? Or is it questionable research practices, some sloppy research, where, as you have seen there from the slippery slope of research misconduct, we're taking shortcuts, cheating, beautification of images, or is it really a research misconduct behavior like potentially plagiarism? And so questionable research practices and research misconduct have become more and more prevalent in higher education. And over the next set of slides, you will see in terms of papers that have been retracted, how this have played out in academia. But you can ask yourself, with the undisclosed use of AI, and we had we had a poll just before for the tea break where we have actually posed the question, and we will in a moment have a look at your responses. Next slide, please. So then acting with integrity, quite similar to what Eleonora explained, we asked the question, what a responsible researcher ought not to do. And I think by now there's consensus. We have an expectation that researchers do not find themselves in a situation of falsifying data, fabricating data, plagiarizing words, or act with questionable research practices. Essentially, where we want our researchers to be is to act with integrity. In other words, be a responsible researcher that ensures that the research findings are relevant, valid, and trustworthy. And as with the European Code, there's also the Singapore statement that we present that is a tool, a guiding tool that you can use to adhere to those 4 basic principles of research integrity. Next slide, please. Thank you for the animation, Eleonora. So then let's take a closer look at the dilemma that we're facing, in particular in the MENA region, in other words, the Middle East, North Africa region. And this paper of 2023, where it highlights the number of papers retracted over the last decade, where it shows you the increase or the decrease in numbers. But this could be a reflection for us to ask, where are we going in terms of the use of AI in the academic space? Could you please go to the next slide? So as you can see, obviously, there's a huge increase over the last decade in terms of conference papers, journal papers that have been retracted, and it should be a concern to all of us in the space of research ethics and integrity. And the number, in fact, have gone beyond 10,000 at the end, as you can see the date there, at 8th of December 2023, where the number of retracted papers have gone beyond 10,000. I think it was 11,624. But if we take a closer look, if we can just move forward, Eleonora, please. If we take a closer look at the MENA region and in the countries within the MENA context, how they have contributed to these retracted papers. You can see the countries listed there from Saudi Arabia to India and their particular contributions to this number of more than 10,000 papers that got retracted. And keeping in mind the question that we ask, will the use of AI or the undisclosed use of AI further impact, adversely potentially impact this particular numbers that we see. So in the next slide, you will see we explain these particular numbers, where you can see in Saudi Arabia in particular published more than 100,000 articles over the past 2 decades as the highest retractions because of the 30 per 10,000 articles. But the second point explains it well, that if conference papers are included, withdrawal, in particular the IEEE, would put China on top of the list. And as you, for those in the particular scientific domain of engineering, would know that IEEE is quite a prominent platform. And so in this case, IEEE was the publisher of the highest number of retraction in this particular time frame. Next slide. So again, asking the question, will AI impact this kind of graphics? If we look at since November 2022, there I list 2 months where Retraction Watch in particular have highlighted the use of papers that have gone through a peer review cycle that has gone through the hands of the editors and chief editors and have been published in journals, peer-reviewed journals. And in March 2024, last year, so over a year ago, the number of papers that had used undisclosed use of ChatGPT and other AI tools stood at 77. And in the subsequent month, as you would see there, that number then increased to 92. I haven't, after this, checked if the numbers have gone up, because as you can tell by the dates, it's been more than a year ago. Next slide, please. So just to highlight the March data for you, to clearly see which of the countries contributed to the 77 articles. On top of the list there, you can see within the MENA Asia region, it's India on top with 23, followed by the US with 11 articles that were retracted due to the undisclosed use of AI. Next slide, please. So over the last year and this year in particular, we have seen this publication by Wiley, where they have done a study, and I've only focused on the European, Middle East, and Africa responses, where they've asked the question to the researchers, to the authors, the co-authors that publish. They asked the question to the researchers: what is the role of publishers in the age of AI? And as you can see, the responses there, I apologize for the small font, is that publishers must provide clear guidelines on what use of AI is acceptable. They also highlighted that researchers want to know what are the pitfalls to avoid when it comes to using particular AI tools. And you can see what the concerns in terms of percentage are. There's also a call for publishers to provide clear guidelines on responsible AI use. And finally, to share some recommendations on what AI tools to be used, what AI tools are safe. And so over the next couple of slides, Chris and I will focus on those particular aspects. Next slide, please. So what are the global recommendations? We have seen post Feb 2023, when the COPE position statement was published, the COPE position statement on AI and authorship. And all publishers are aligned with that, saying that AI tools should not be listed as a co-author. So it's a common recommendation that AI tools cannot be listed as an AI because they cannot take responsibility for the accuracy of the data that is presented in the paper. And then next point, please. In terms of citation and literature review, AI outputs should not be cited as the primary source, and this is an important point because it could be inaccurate or fabricated. As Chris alluded, Chris showed us the case study on the dilemma game. These tools are quite sophisticated, and one still needs to apply critical thinking when it comes to using the text of these particular, the outputs of these tools. Next point, please. So in terms of data collection, it's clear that for data collection, the cleaning of the data, analysis and interpretation, and the use of AI for data collection and so on must be disclosed in the method section or a similar section depending on the journal that you publish in, or in a AI declaration section. Next slide, please. In terms of using AI for data or for code generation, again, it's not prohibited. It says that if you use it, the only thing that you need to do is to disclose it within the method section or in a AI declaration where you have your own declaration, or it says there the code can be an excellent resource for educational purposes, and in some cases some journals may allow you to upload the code as supplementary data. Next point. in terms of visualization, and that would be for an image, a figure, a video, a table, or so on, any use of AI for visualization is disclosed. Again, it's not that you or any researcher is prohibited in using AI for these particular functions or purposes. The idea is to disclose it, and disclosure comes in where we look at accountability, integrity, honesty. Remember those 4 principles that Eleonora alluded to, the 4 principles in the Singapore statement that I also touched on. Next point, please. And this is the million-dollar question. The one question I get asked consistently is, so if I use Grammarly, do I have to disclose the use of it? And the answer or the suggestion or recommendation is writing, language, and styling. So authors should disclose the use of AI for writing, for language style editing in the acknowledgement section. As you would know, papers, manuscripts, you are allowed to have an acknowledgement section or in an AI declaration. And then importantly, it says the use of spell checking software, like Grammarly, for example, might not be needed to be declared. It all depends on the extent to which you have used the tool, for example, writing, language, and editing style. Next slide, please. So for any other use that you could think of in your particular space, in your particular research, you could list that either in the method section, the acknowledgement section, or in a standalone AI declaration section. Next point, please. So you may ask, so what does an AI declaration section looks like? There I present to you an example where you can, as a researcher who is about to submit their manuscript, you can use this particular wording as an example of what a declaration on generative AI and AI-assisted technologies in the writing process could look like. Next slide, please. And there you can see another example. Chris and I submitted a paper to UNESCO, and as pedantic as Christopher is, he worded our declaration for the use of AI in quite detail. So there you can see another example of how detailed your AI declaration could be. In other cases, you can also, there's also the reference, how to reference ChatGPT, for example, the version date, the manufacturer OpenAI, the date on which you have accessed it. Next point, please. There's the example that I highlighted earlier for you, where you can use AI or this particular declaration where you declare the use of AI to improve readability, clarity, and so on. Next slide. This is also a checklist, what we call an AI disclosure checklist, where you can ask yourself, how have I used AI in the ideation, the research, and then you ask yourself to which extent I have used, to what extent I've used AI. Did I use it minimally, just for brainstorming, for example, moderately or significantly? So this is, as a researcher conversation we can have with ourselves to gauge to which extent I have used AI and for what purposes. Next point, please. So the idea is, and the recommendation globally, as you have seen, is that there's only 2 rules when it comes to the use of AI. One, disclose the use of AI, and the second rule is learn rule 1. In other words, disclose, disclose, disclose. Next slide, please. So then, to sum up what we've been talking about this morning, and in particular in the context of AI, I like this quote that says, the ongoing dialogue around AI and research integrity, it's complex, but by fostering a culture of openness, transparency, and ethical use of AI, we can ensure that AI propels research forward without compromising its very foundation. Next slide, please. And with that, I hand over to Chris.
Okay, so I'll just talk very briefly and try to avoid overlapping too much with Sydney. So as I've said before, I'm a science editor. So my position is not really in research, it's more research adjacent. But I'm increasingly seeing the use of undeclared AI, especially in the last few months. Yeah, I've seen tens or more, maybe over 100 papers where AI seems to have been used but has not been declared. And so from my viewpoint, the issues that we run into are obviously authorship and accountability. So who is to be held accountable for this work if it hasn't been properly vetted and hasn't been declared? Accuracy. You know, AI makes mistakes, as I'll show you with some examples of AI fabricated references later. And transparency. Why isn't the author declaring it? And then trust in science. So obviously, if we have these issues with our writing, it undermines trust. So can we see the next slide, please, Eleanor? Okay, so as someone who sees a lot of writing before publication, I'm getting better and better at picking up undeclared AI usage. So what sort of things do I look for? What sort of things do the next generation of AI detection tools look for? Tortured phrases and unusual word choices. That's the big one. So it's not the use of one word, it's a pattern over the whole document. Words like paramount, delve, yeah, things like that. Depending on the AI tool that you use, there could be an overemphasis on concision. So not everything written with as few words as possible, or we could see wording that is far too elaborate for the context. So when it goes either way, you know, too much or too little, and the pattern repeats through the text, then it can be a sign that AI usage AI has been involved. Another thing I've found is singular versus plural issues. So especially in medical writing, there's a lot of instances where you want to use sort of an uncountable form of something. So it'll be in the singular form. Other times we want the plural, and it can be inconsistent with the application. So you can have, for example, a conflict of interest statement where in one sentence it refers to honoraria, and then it's honorarium, and it fails to remain consistent. But it's consistent in its inconsistency, in that it'll give you the correct sentence first, and then drops off as it goes down. And can we see the next slide, please? Okay, technical things that can be seen. Overuse of the M dash. As an M dash user myself, this pains me, but yeah, I mean, when you start to see it sort of 6 or 7 times in a document, that's a bit of a giveaway. So it's not the use itself, but the sudden overuse. And in my case, you know, it's authors who didn't know what an M dash was before, hadn't used it before, and now it's appearing in their writing all the time and repeated over the paper. Sometimes we see evidence of copying and pasting from AI models. So dangling quotation marks. When AI generates your text, it's often got quotation marks either side. When we see stray quotation marks in the text, that's one thing we can look for. Unicode superscript. So AI can't switch between superscript and normal font. in Word, but it can give you a superscript 2 or 3. So for example, meters squared or something like that, by writing it in Unicode. Now, as an editor, I frequently have to enter in superscript. And so I use Unicode myself in find and replace and certain macros. But from an author's standpoint, there's not much motivation to do it because it takes much longer than just highlighting the 2 and clicking superscript. And then the last thing, also sometimes font changes. I saw WebKit font in one paper, which would not be a realistic selection. And then maybe the most important thing in terms of trust in science and accuracy is fabricated references. These are cases where the reference looks real. It might even have a DOI, but it does not exist. Can we see the next slide, please? Okay, these are some examples of fabricated references. So you can see these are indistinguishable from an accurate reference. And these are things that I picked up in a paper about a week ago. Yeah, the journal names are real. The author names are real. The title sounds convincing, but there's some giveaways. Can we see the next slide, please? Okay, so anatomy of a fabricated reference. So we can see here, real authors, reasonable but fabricated title, real journal. Something I've noticed is a lot of the fabricated references tend to be slightly old. I mean, 2017 is not all that long ago, but a lot of them are from sort of then or earlier. You generally don't see anything written in 24 or 25. And then the DOI points to nowhere. It's a real looking DOI. If it's generated it with the HTTPS in front of it, it'll look like a real link, but when you click on it, it goes nowhere. Okay, can we see the next slide, please? Okay, so detecting fabricated references. So I found a useful Crossref tool for this purpose that can do it en masse, up to 1,000 references at a time. You don't need to cut out the reference numbers, it'll automatically ignore those. It helps if the references have a DOI in there already, but they don't need to. And what you do, you copy and paste your reference list into simple text query, and it will look up all the DOIs. Now, why I said it's helpful for detection purposes for it to have the DOI in there is when it's a fake DOI, it won't link. So if you look at the slide, you can see the first 2 references have a live link for the DOI. And then when we go down, we have the original DOI from the reference, but there's no link. And that will happen pretty much every time. Now, if we see 1 or 2 like this, it could be an error, but often I find when there are issues with fabricated references, it's not 1 or 2, it's maybe a third of the reference list quite often, a third, a quarter. There's usually a lot. They're usually mainly in the introduction section. And I don't think it's necessarily a sign that the author has fabricated their research. I think a lot of the time it's an issue with the author using AI in place of a search engine to back up something that they've said. So they've searched, they've got an incorrect result, but they've not checked the output, they've pasted it in their reference list. And I think that can potentially, over the long term, lead to a lot of problems because all this authorship data is linked to retraction data, is linked to ORCID. and it's things that are not detected now can be retroactively detected. So I think most important thing is exactly what Sydney said. Declare, declare, declare. If you're not sure, used a little bit, make a declaration. Yeah. Okay. I think that's time now to move on to the discussion.
Yes, maybe we can a little bit short this discussion moment, so we can also cover the last part of this presentation that is more locally related. So we will be covering MENA explanations and case studies of research integrity policy making. So maybe we can just devote 5 minutes discussion if someone has questions or observations to share. Yes, Sydney, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Eleonora. I just want to share one example about a PLOS One paper that got retracted in April last year. And there were two specific reasons why this particular paper got retracted. The main reason, obviously, was the undisclosed use of AI. But when the editor asked the first author and the corresponding author about 18 of the 76 cited references, which could not be verified, the first author and the corresponding author then provided replacement references for those 18 unverified references, and they did not correspond with the statements in the manuscript, in the article. And that paper then got retracted because of the undisclosed use of AI, but in particular because the 18 unverified references did not correspond to the statements in the paper. So there are the editors and the quality checks that are happening, and one needs to be careful to the issues that Chris alluded to just now in terms of the unverified citations and the references, I mean.
Yeah, certainly the record for what I've seen in Japan was 15 inaccurate references out of about 60. And I've seen others that are close to that. So I think what we're seeing in terms of retractions for undeclared usage is a very small tip of the iceberg. I think there's going to be a lot coming. Does anyone have any comments or opinions or questions?
I haven't seen that people has comments or observations or opinions about that, but we will be also happy to read your comments privately if you want to reach out to us after this workshop.
Shall we see the results of the poll really quickly?
Yes, absolutely.
I forgot about that.
if Mira can share. Researchers should be allowed to use AI with an appropriate declaration, which completely resonates with also the golden rule shared by Sydney and also Christopher. So share and declare. This is the first rule, and the second rule is follow the first rule. So declare, declare, declare. So very, very happy to see this alignment between what Sydney said and what your perceptions are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that being said, maybe we can move to the last part of this 3-hour workshop. So after all this fruitful discussion, let's take a step back and look at how research integrity plays out in different parts of the world. So it's time to zoom in on the local dimensions, what's happening in Europe, US, and the MENA region to better understand how global principles take shape in regional context. So let's begin by exploring the research integrity training initiatives that have been implemented so far, starting with those in Europe and North America, and then Sydney will guide us through the initiatives in the MENA region with a more focused approach on research integrity policy making at an institutional level. So what's been happening in Europe lately with research integrity training? Well, there's been a real push to tighten things up, especially after some high-profile retractions. We are seeing a lot more teamwork now. Government agencies, universities, and publishers are all stepping up to the plate to straighten research integrity from a multi-stakeholder perspective. But honestly, the big moves usually start with government initiatives, at least in Europe. And the European Commission's priorities are so important for that. Once they set the tone, everyone else, like funding agencies, institutions, and publishers, tend to follow their lead. So, for example, the European Commission's Horizon 2020 program has poured a lot of resources into this. They have backed several key projects aimed at developing educational materials and resources, not just for Europe, but globally. So let's look at a few key initiatives in the continent. First of all, we have Path to Integrity. This project is all about building a solid foundation of research integrity. They are creating resources for students and researchers at all stages of their careers, focusing on ethical responsibility through really engaging and hands-on teaching tools. Then you have Integrity. Here, the focus is on innovative teaching methods to promote research ethics, and think of it as blending practical real-world learning with traditional classroom instruction. So they are coming up with some really comprehensive training materials to ensure ethical practices are ingrained in the research process, okay? Then you have SOPs for RI Toolbox. This works like a book for research integrity. It offers a set of standard operating procedures that institutions and funding bodies can adapt to their needs. And the idea is really to create a consistent high standard of research integrity across the board. And then you have Virtue, and then there is our project, okay, the Virtue one. This initiative stands for Virtue-Based Ethics and Integrity for researchers, and takes a slightly different approach because we are rather concentrating on a virtue-based methodology. We try to emphasize character and moral integrity in the researcher. So our program is really designed to train trainers who then foster a culture of ethical awareness within the research community. So all these projects are really paving the way in Europe for a more ethical and responsible research environment by focusing on education and collaborative policymaking. But let's not forget, none of this would have been possible without the strong support from the government and the multi-stakeholder approach that brought everyone together. And in the same vein, we can look at research integrity training initiatives at the institutional level in Europe. So take the University of Oslo, for example. They've been implementing some great strategies to foster research integrity within their own walls from the training standpoints, or you may consider the strong educational efforts laid out by the UK Research Integrity Office in the UK, of course, which are really setting a high standard. However, while these individual institutional initiatives are so valuable in the continent, they still represent a minority compared to the broader, more collaborative projects driven by the European Commission and other community-wide efforts. So most of the significant progress we are seeing in research integrity training in Europe is coming from these larger communitarian approaches. Every now and then, we also come across some really impactful individual initiatives focused on research integrity training, especially in areas like bioethics and bioinformatics. So we have Sydney here, that is a bioethicist and a specialist and expert of the relationships between research integrity and bioethics. So these efforts aim to build a strong culture of research integrity within specific scientific projects. And one standout example here is the research integrity training by the Human Brain Project. So for those who are not familiar with, the Human Brain Project is a major research initiative that aims to advance our understanding of the human brain. It started with the goal of integrating neuroscience, medicine, computing to decipher the brain's intricate workings. So in terms of research integrity, the Human Brain Project has really led the way. They've put together insightful training programs designed specifically for their needs, and these programs ensure that everyone involved in the project sticks to the highest ethical research standards, which helps foster a strong culture of integrity throughout the entire project. But now maybe we can shift our focus to the Virtue project also, because this is the very initiative under which this course is offered with the Embassy of Good Science, right? And at the end of this course, you will also receive a certificate from the Embassy of Good Science, which really underscores the value of what we are doing here now. As I said before, this project is unique because it takes a train-the-trainer approach, setting it apart from other initiatives. So who developed it? The Virtue project was created by a consortium funded by the European Commission. And talking about the training approach, we can say that first, it emphasizes virtue ethics, so focusing on moral character and professional virtues of researchers and research professionals. It also encourages adherence to the core principles of scientific research, known as the ethos of science. And another key element is also learning by doing, which means a lot of hands-on practical exercises. And the teaching style is very learner-centered, designed to meet your needs and keep you engaged. And most importantly, it uses blended learning. So this is a mix of e-learning modules and participatory group session. And let's dive also into the outreach and impact of the Virtue project, because it's quite impressive. Since spring 2020, around 470 trainers have participated in the program, and these trainers have in turn reached over 3,300 researchers all across Europe. So you are joining a wide and impactful community. And in terms of program impact, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive as well, because regarding the e-learning modules, the 60% of participants rated them 8 or higher. The participatory exercises were even more popular, with 80% rating them 8 or higher. And when it comes to training, to trainer empowerment, 82% felt that the training significantly improved their ability to organize and teach research integrity courses at their own institutions. And finally, 92% of participants said they would recommend these interactive exercises to others. So these numbers really demonstrate the significant impact of the program. So it's fantastic that you are part of this initiative today. So the Embassy of Good Science website, which hosts the Virtue initiative, is an incredibly valuable tool for you. It's an online open access platform specifically designed to enhance research integrity and ethics. So if you explore the site, the website, you will see just how useful the resources there can be. And in terms of key features, it serves as an information hub, acting as a central repository for guidelines, educational materials, and case scenarios related to research integrity and ethics. And moreover, it's a wiki-based platform that allows users to contribute. So you can log in with your ORCID to add, update, and refine content, fostering a collaborative environment. And lastly, there's an emphasis on community engagement, because the website has really dedicated pages for relevant initiatives, news, and events, making it easier for the research community to stay connected and informed. So all these features make the Embassy of Good Science website an essential resource in promoting ethical research practices, and you can use it in your everyday life also to find out the most suitable answers or best practices when not for your professional dilemmas. But before moving to the US landscape, let me share also a few final notes about the mission and history of the Virtue initiative, which I think you will find particularly engaging. So the Virtue initiative originally developed to meet the specific needs of the European research community. Its content and management are a direct reflection of those European origins. However, the impact of the Virtue initiative, and you are all are a testament of this, has grown far beyond Europe. It's now expanding its reach globally, attracting attention and participation from researchers and research professionals all over the world. And one of the most exciting aspects is the effort to attract global ambassadors. For instance, the initiative is actively engaging with non-European communities, and a notable example of this was the collaboration with the African Research Integrity Network during the 7th World Conference for Research Integrity in Cape Town in 2022. So these efforts are clearly helping to create a truly global community committed to enhancing research integrity and ethics. All right, now let's talk about the situation in the United States. It's a bit different over there, more focused on individual institutions rather than driven solely by the government. Of course, there has been significant input from the government. For example, the Office for Research Integrity, or ORI, plays an important role. They developed policies and regulations aimed at ensuring ethical research, but much of the heavy lifting is actually done by private initiatives within individual institutions. And this means there's a lot of emphasis on self-regulation and internal policies when dealing with research integrity training. And this is also acknowledged by experts. A recent article published last year on the scholarly kitchen, written by Angela Cochran from the American Society of Clinical Oncology, really drives this point home. Angela argued that the responsibility for conducting integrity checks should lie with the institutions where researchers are employed, and she even says a solution to the problem is for institutions to take responsibility for conducting integrity checks and providing validation to the journal. And this can be applied, of course, to all initiatives run by the single institutions to educate and train human resources to research integrity. Now, it's true that many institutions and universities still have a long way to go. Many don't even have an equivalent of an integrity officer, but there are some that have made significant strides in the right direction. For example, Columbia University has the Research and Data Integrity Program, which provides access to a range of research integrity resources. And this includes online training for handling digital scientific images, and their institutional policy on research misconduct ensures that any allegations of misconduct are addressed properly and in compliance with funder requirements. Similarly, we have Indiana University that offers a research integrity webinar series, and in these webinars, staff from the Research Integrity Office and faculty members discuss real cases of research misconduct. These are great steps. They all are at the institutional level, but it's important to note that they are still somewhat isolated initiatives. So while there is progress, there's definitely more work to be done, especially now in Trump's administration, to ensure that research integrity is deeply embedded in institutional practices across the board and that all efforts are streamlined. So that being said, I would also, to wrap up this discussion on a positive note, highlighting some promising developments from North America. First, there's been a significant increase in support for research on research integrity. So grants allocated for integrity studies were growing before Trump's administration. That witnessed a larger investment in the future for research integrity training. For instance, the US Office of Research Integrity awards grants for research and conferences that encourage empirical studies on factors affecting research integrity. And universities are also stepping up from other continents as well. Take the University of Sydney in Australia, for example. They've announced a scholarship for research on problematic original articles in high-impact molecular cancer journals. And the second positive development is the emergence of new fields of study. Because with the rise of AI tools, and we largely touched on that point with Chris and Sydney before, the kinds and scale of misconduct are changing, which means we need new ways to detect and tackle problematic papers. And this has led to suggestions for a new discipline called forensic scientometrics, or FOSSAI for short. So while efforts to uphold research integrity by individual researchers, publishers, and universities are nothing new, having a dedicated discipline with a name like FOSSAI is a novel idea. And finally, several stakeholders, including government agencies, academic institutions, and publishers, are expected to ramp up integrity measures following this FOSSAI trend. But anyway, these are two green lights that promise positive changes ahead worldwide. So that's everything from my side regarding Europe and the US. Now over to you, Sydney, for a very quick update from MENA region.
Thank you, Eleonora, for giving us the global insights in terms of the global West to see what's happening in the field of research integrity training. Now let's take a closer look in the MENA and beyond region. I just want to highlight this particular paper by David Resnick that says there are 4 ways to promote research integrity: education, policy development, policy enforcement, and then leadership. And so it's important that we realize and value the importance of research integrity for our research community, including postgrad students, because they are ultimately the one that's conducting the research. So we need to enable them to conduct responsible conduct of research. Next slide, please. So let's take a closer look, as Eleonora also showcased this image of MENA, and I've seen the comment in the chat, is India part of MENA? No, we know it's part of Asia, the broader Asian region. Next slide. So looking at the MENA region in particular, in the Middle East, in 2022 and beyond, we've realized in the MENA, in the Middle East region, that there's a need for a dedicated conference that covers academic and research integrity. Academic because it involves from kindergarten to grade 12, as well as secondary and tertiary education. So this body was then established, where for the first time in December 2023, we held the ACARI, which is the Academic and Research Integrity Conference, that focuses on educating our research community on academic integrity as well as research integrity. I was invited to be the deputy chair of this particular initiative. Next slide, please. So then in 2025, this year, in February, we had the second conference in Pakistan hosted by the University of Lahore. It was a successful event, a lot of participants, a lot of students. That was quite surprising to see how many students attended. And there were also a lot of pre-conference workshops that focus on particular generative AI ethics, and the use of AI and upholding integrity as these AI tools evolve. Next slide, please. So then in 2027, I now have the pleasure to announce to you, in 2027, this initiative is coming to Saudi. Next slide. Yeah, so in 2027, we will have this particular event happening in Riyadh in Saudi, where we will then again have expert speakers on the field of academic and research integrity. It will be an open invitation to policymakers, to researchers, academics, students to participate in this event, and more information and website will follow in due course. I will be serving on this local organizing committee for the 2027 conference. Next slide, please. So this year in May, in last month, I was invited by Turnitin, and the purpose of my talk was to focus on the challenges and opportunities that come with AI, and how the task on us to safeguard research integrity have intensified. And it was a well-attended event in Riyadh, and there we also had a lot of academics that really participated in the discussion around promoting and safeguarding research integrity. That's that's become more imperative in the time of AI. Next slide, please. In March this year, I've also been part of the African Research Integrity Network, but just to showcase Professor Allah from University of I think she's at the University of Egypt, and she has done phenomenal work within the MENA in the North African region to promote research integrity, and she participated in this event that was held between the African Research Integrity Network and the U.S. Office of Research Integrity, where she presented to talk about what's happening in North Africa to strengthen research integrity. Next slide, please. And then, as Eleonora alluded to, the initiative of the 7th World Conference on Research Integrity, where the Cape Town Statement was developed in South Africa. Just to say that that at the 8th World Conference on Research Integrity, it was this year. It was last year. And then next year will be the 9th World Conference on Research Integrity in Vancouver in Canada. Next slide, please. And just also to highlight to you the Cape Town Statement and how it's been accepted by the global research integrity community, because this particular statement was needed to promote fairness and equity in research. Next slide. And then something new, a new kid on the block, staying within the southern part of Africa. These are my colleagues at the South African universities and research integrity offices have developed this particular symposium that's taking place in October this year. Again, something new, but it highlights the importance of educating our colleagues in the field of research integrity. And this event is an in-person event, but it will be open to research integrity officers, research administrators, academics, researchers, and so on. Next slide, please. So in terms of policymaking, what are the values and what are the drivers, the vehicles for making sure that we have policies in place that promotes research integrity? We first need to follow a certain value set, principle set for research integrity, as Tatiana alluded to. So what happens to these cases of research misconduct? What happens to the cases of questionable research practices where there are so many retractions? Are there any consequences for the researchers? Is it punitive or not? Are there ways in which we can educate our researchers? Do we have policies in place? And how do we, in this time, promote responsible and ethical use of AI? So just as an example, at my institution, next slide, please, what we do We have a dedicated website that speaks to research integrity. We've developed a policy framework that consists of a research integrity policy, an investigation procedure for misconduct, investigation procedure for research, for questionable research practices, a guideline on publication ethics and authorship. So typically it focuses on what constitutes authorship, what are the consequences for publication ethics breaches, and so on. A dedicated statement, university statement on the use of AI in research. And then finally, a dedicated guideline that focuses on internal research collaboration and data management. We also endorse certain international standards like COPE, the Montreal Statement, and the Singapore Statement that I alluded to earlier. Next slide, please. So as part of our policy framework, you can see at the very end of this statement, it says that we endorse the Singapore Statement, those 4 principles, as well as the 14 principles included in the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity. And that is an institutional endorsement for all divisions at our institution. Next slide. So just to give you a snapshot of the policy framework, we have the policy that sets out what are the values that we adhere to, but then also what would happen if there are breaches of those particular values. And for that, we have certain definitions of what is research misconduct, what is plagiarism, falsification, fabrication, and how that will be investigated if there are breaches of those particular principles. There's also for questionable research practices, a particular procedure that we follow. So as you can see, policy is one way to enforce research integrity at your institution. Next slide. In addition, just to show you our guidelines and the statement, our joint statement on the use of AI in research. Next slide. So that particular statement that you've seen, the joint position statement on the use of AI, is really based on the COPE position statement that was published in Feb 2023, where we say that you can use the AI tools as long as it's fully disclosed in the manuscript. Next slide, please. So yeah, just to highlight some certain points that I've already mentioned in terms of AI use, the co-position statement, it cannot be an author, it can be used as long as there is a transparent disclosure where and how it must be used, and then importantly, researchers take responsibility for the content. Next slide, please. And just to showcase what's happening in China, based on the co-position statement, it says the same thing. You cannot list it as a co-author, but you can use it for various other purposes as long as there's full disclosure, as you can see in point 2 of that article. Next slide, please. In the South African context, they also have a dedicated guideline that speaks to the use of AI in research communications, and they also endorse this idea of using it subject to full disclosure. Next slide. And there it shows you how you can reference it. Again, something that I've touched on earlier. Next slide. So before I conclude, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Tatiana's question or comment, and she says, Sydney, could you provide examples of consequences to researchers who underwent investigation and were proved to follow questionable research practices? So the key word in terms of consequences is proportionality. In other words, if there are allegations of research misconduct, it's been investigated in terms of the procedure. The procedure sets out certain what we call corrective actions or sanctions. Now, corrective actions could be, for example, the paper needs to be corrected. or the sanction could be that the person would undergo mentorship. It could also be that the person's contract is terminated. It could be that the person is given a final warning. So those are the types of consequences that could emerge from an investigation where there is a finding of research misconduct or questionable research practices, as long as those sanctions or corrective actions are proportionate to the allegation. And mentorship is always one of those key aspects that would emerge from an investigation, where you can see that the person needs further mentorship, supervision to ensure that such misbehavior do not reoccur. I hope that answers your question, Tatiana. Thank you. So then, just in conclusion, in terms of training for trust, we know what those 4 principles are, the European principles in the Code of Conduct, the Singapore statement that I've highlighted, it really overlaps. What are the 4 pillars in terms of how do we promote research integrity, education, policy development, policy enforcement, and leadership? Involve your leadership to be part of these educational initiatives and endeavors, because leadership sets the example and they set the tone at the institution. The result of following those principles, of following those pillars, is fostering responsible conduct of research, promoting responsible use of AI in research, and ultimately a trustworthy scholarly record where you don't have these cases of research misconduct or questionable research practices. And with that, I thank you, and then over to you, Eleonora.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sydney, for this insightful overview of what's happening in the MENA space, and also what have been the main pillars touched during this 3-hour workshop. So we are wrapping up this journey together. Thank you all so much for your insights, contributions, reactions throughout the session. It's been a highly concentrated deep dive into research integrity, I know, and we hope it sparked some reflections and practical ideas that you can take forward. Of course, if you are interested in going further, especially in training others, you might be want to check out the upcoming Force 11 summer courses. Chris, Sydney, and I will be co-leading one course titled Empowering Future Trainers in Research Integrity, a course integrating theory and hands-on exercises in tools, stakeholder engagement, and science outreach. So good news, there's a scholarship opportunity and the call has just been extended. So I dropped the link here in the chat. Don't hesitate to apply. You could be awarded a full scholarship to join us. And finally, as promised, let's circle back to where we started with our opening icebreaker, but now let's flip it into a closing warmer. So after spending these 3 hours together, diving into the many dimensions of research integrity, I would love to hear how your perspectives may have shifted. So here's the question again with fresh eyes. If research integrity were a travel destination, which one would it be now and why? So let's see how the journey has changed your map. Maybe we can see the results, Mira. So Switzerland and Antarctica. I see this interesting shift towards the last option, Antarctica, regulating and attracting global cooperation, which means that especially the last session about research integrity initiatives across US, Europe, and MENA gave the right insights. So it's a huge response, and we will be also very curious to hear more from you and how did you perceive this personal shift in looking at research integrity. Thank you so much. So that being said, this brings us to the very last activity of the day. A huge thank you for your active participation and thoughtful contributions throughout the workshop. We will follow up soon with your certificates of attendance, and we truly hope to see many of you again, especially at the upcoming Force 11 course we mentioned. This will happen in the second half of July. And in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find all our contact details on the workshop webpage. Thanks again. See you soon, and hand over to Yassir or Mira for the last words.
Eleanor, Sydney, and Christopher, thank you so much for such a wonderful, wonderful session. And I would like to let you know out of my experience that during the events that we barely receive questions, this means that our speakers have done huge efforts explaining all questions that might be running in any of our audience's head. And I can tell that the chat box is full of interactive cooperations from our audience. So thank you so much for being with us today. And for our attendees, thank you so much for attending with us today. And in the screen, you will find a QR code. I would like just to ask you to scan this QR code and complete the survey to help us improve your experience. And by help us improve your experience, I mean that we would be waiting for you to respond to us which field of open science, which field of focuses that you would like us to have training sessions for, because your response will be the only way for us to know more about what's missed or what's needed in our region, so that we can bring wonderful people like Eleanor, Sydney, and Christopher to be with us and share their insights and knowledge with us. So please take less than 2 minutes of your time, scan the QR code, and please complete this survey to help us improve our focuses and to improve your experience. Next slide, please, Mira. And as we mentioned earlier about FOAM, that we have a growing number of members and our network is increasing by the day. We would like to ask you, or we would like to invite you to join our membership. Our membership is free of charge and it's institutional. So it's like empowering the Arab communities to spearhead their open science development. So if your institution follows the activities of the Open Research Forum and believes in its mission to support the development of open science in the region, we would be really honored to have you on board with us. We will be really happy to invite you to join the forum's membership and to work together towards a more knowledgeable and more open world. So you can scan the QR code here, which will take you to our membership page on our website, or you can simply just go to our website. It has all the information you may need, which is forumforopen.org. Next slide, please. And also, you can register now for the following community development activities for July and for September. For July, it's making space on the shelves, open access books of the open science. And for September, it's infrastructures to support open access books and journals by Directory of Open Books, Open and WAJ. And we will be happy again to see you there. You will be receiving some sort of notifications and reminders in case like you can register now through this QR code, or you can visit also our website to the community development activities section and you will be able to register there. Next slide, please, Mira. So once again, thank you so much. Thank you, Sydney, Eleonora, and Christopher for your time today. And thank you for our audience for being with us today. These kind of events are for you. And we will be working in order to provide you with all what you really need to get from our experts. And we will be seeing you again next month. Thank you so much.